Austen, welcome to the Austen X podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So I follow you on X, and I've always kind of liked the stuff that you're saying, what you're kind of doing. And then I saw you announce the Gauntlet AI program, which I thought was really interesting. And then, of course, what caught my eye was you were putting it in Austin, which was really interesting and cool. So, can you tell us about what Gauntlet is and what you're doing? And of course, the thing that I love about all of it is why Austin.
Yeah. So by way of background, we've been training people to be software engineers for coming up on 8 years now. So that, it's our longtime business. That's what we're very used to. A little over a year ago, companies started asking us, what should people know with regard to AI in engineering? And we didn't really know. So we sent out a research team. They talked to hundreds of companies, tried to figure out what the most impactful aspects of AI are. We talked to all the big model providers and said, what are the best practices for using this stuff? And they kind of said, we don't even really know. This is, we're just building tools and we're a little bit surprised by how people are using it. So we started training companies. So training engineers at companies to use AI. And a lot of our bigger customers happen to be in Austin, and they eventually, this is the first time in my career that it's been somebody else's idea, and they came to me and asked me to build something. So Trilogy, who was famously behind Trilogy University in the 90s, and we'll get into a lot of that. They basically said, look, us and a few other companies we want to go on a hiring spree. We want to hire hundreds and hundreds of hungry AI savvy engineers, and we can't find them, and we can't, run Trilogy University the way we used to, because for reasons we'll get into later, mostly because the Trilogy University play was just go find students from the top universities and they would, automatically be exactly who you want. And that's no longer true anymore. That signal isn't there. You can't blindly hire. So basically they asked us to build it for them. So I view myself as the service provider building a school for the companies trying to create AI engineers within Austin. And that's, I guess I should probably at some point explain what Gauntlet AI is, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's a whole bunch to unpack in there. I think the first thing I want to start is the point that you're made about, okay, what does it mean to be trained in AI? I mean, we're right in the middle of, as we're recording this kind of like 12 days of open AI and all the kind of the goodies that they're dropping, and it's changing so fast. So what are you even training? Because who I think the rumor is what, and as we're recording this, they haven't announced what the 12th day is, but the rumor is it's 03. What are you teaching them? Are you teaching them foundational, like this is how you think about tools as they change? Are you teaching them math, for lack of a better term? Like, what is it that you have to train people on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And one of the tricky things you find when you try to build curriculum like this, so we normally, when we build curriculum for, say, a software engineer, we would go to hiring managers of software engineering teams and say, what are you looking for when you want to hire? They give you a giant list of, these are the skills I need, these are the attributes I want, and we go turn that into curriculum. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's obviously some pedagogical whatever that goes into it, but on the outside, it's very simple. This was the first time I've gone to companies and say, what do you want? And they say, we don't know, but we really, really want it. So there was the most important.
Okay, but are we dealing then into almost a hype cycle? Because they're like, well, it's the shiny new object. I think I want this thing.
That was my assumption, honestly.
Yeah, how do we
initially
separate between?
I was like, okay, you really need a little bit of, to be okay at prompting. We'll teach you a little bit of that. But let's go see what's actually. So when we sent out our research team, our guidelines were you have to find things that are actually working in production at scale. Because there's all sorts of Twitter demos, I guess X demos, I should say, that they look really, really cool, or they're, single player apps, but they don't scale well, or they break, or, like that doesn't really matter. So we found there are a few fundamental principles of AI that you just have to get really good at. But before I get into some of the details, our mental model for what we're doing with Gauntlet is we are teaching people to get onto the kind of crest of the wave of AI and then just ride it. So we're not training people to create research style breakthroughs necessarily. We're not going to build the next greatest model. We're not going to build the next transformer. But as soon as that transformer is out, then we want to be able to ride that wave. We so some of it is that what's the right way to describe this? A lot of what we're teaching students is actually how to find and disseminate and learn the right information really, really quickly. That's actually a core fundamental aspect of being able to use AI. And Trilogy University found that was similar in the '90s when they ran this and the internet was brand new. You could, you didn't go to a software engineering school and say, how do you write JavaScript? Because JavaScript was 3 days old, So a core part of what we're doing is teaching people how to learn and how to stay updated. We're actually dedicating a decent portion of each day to, who are the people, what's the research coming out, what's the latest, who do we need to follow on X, because that is actually the way that a lot of this is disseminated. That's the space where stuff happens. And then there is the more practical side, which is how do you build with AI? So again, we're not pioneering AI research, but we're saying what are the latest and greatest tools? How do you put them together in the best way? How do you get AI to write the best code? How do you get AI to understand data, understand the data that you're using? How do you feed that to a model most efficiently so that the model gets smarter? How do you build in feedback loops so the model you're using gets continually smarter about what you're building over time? And how do you prototype stuff? So there's how do you create designs using AI? How do you create backend architecture using AI? So there's kind of the direct instruction layer, then there's the teaching people to learn layer, and then most of the time we're going to be spending actually building stuff. So we're building a bunch of different applications, AI first, meaning every time your fingers are touching the code, the output should be AI, and then you're tweaking the output from AI, but you're not sitting down and writing code. AI is writing all of the code.
So the material said an AI engineer, and I'm hearing you describe it. So is it specifically a AI, someone focused on AI, or should I be thinking about it almost in reverse now? Is it because it's an engineer that's using AI, and eventually that AI kind of nomenclature is just going to get absorbed? And it's because how could you be an engineer in 6 months not be using AI?
Yeah, so I think nomenclature in software world is always a tricky thing. We have data scientists, and then everybody who started using data became a data scientist, even though that word didn't make sense. AI is kind of going through a similar cycle where no one really knows. Sometimes we'll say AI first engineer, sometimes we'll say AI engineer. Then there are AI researchers, and what's a different? It's all very ephemeral, but very, very
and it's moving so fast as well that it changes.
Yeah. So what we are building, or what we're helping people become, is someone who is an absolute expert at using AI to build things.
So then, and I want to go back. You said interesting. You said like you don't touch the code; the AI is touching the code. So do you? This is kind of this 10x engineer, this 100x engineer you kind of keep seeing. Do you see? How do you see these kind of things affecting hiring patterns? Just like you see all these people coming to you saying like, I want this, because do you see that the kind of that productivity curve increasing because with these, we haven't even got into the power of agents that come on top of this, right? Like you're going to be building this, and then you have, I keep hearing it, and by background, like I always say like, I have no idea how to code, but I've actually been able to use ChatGPT for like nominal HTML coding for like the website stuff, which for me is blowing my mind because I can't do that. Now I can do some of this stuff. I can only imagine people who actually know what they're doing has been
Yeah.
able to kind of increase. And so, just some of the stuff about being able to code so much faster, but now you have, call it an engineering team that's actually, one super AI gauntlet engineer with a bunch of AI agents working for them.
Yeah, that's quite literally the goal. So the thesis of the companies that are building this are that, to build, let's say, a company valued at $100 million used to take a team of, we'll say, 70, 80 engineers, something like that, at least to, not startup valuation, but to actually get whatever. But we think that an individual can build $100 million company with AI and very quickly. And that's basically what this is a big bet on. So the companies that we're working with, Trilogy owns hundreds of software companies and they employ tens of thousands of, I don't know what the numbers are, honestly. But they're one of the biggest hirers of engineers on the planet. And so we've been on the training side, we've just been, okay, what are the places that we can optimize efficiency here? How can we build more AI into everything that we're doing? And they're seeing crazy, crazy productivity boosts in ways that would not have been possible even 2 years ago. And we're talking like, I think I can share this, like 50% net increase in productivity in a quarter, which is
Oh
just
my God.
bonkers across thousands of engineers. And then doing that again the next quarter. And I'm not sure if I was supposed to share those numbers, but I think they'll forgive me. So they're looking at that and saying, and that's, with some of their engineers, they're learning it on the side or they're coming to us and they're picking it up, but they're not AI first. And it's not, those productivity gains you're kind of getting almost, if you train engineers to use AI, that's what it looks like. They think, and I think too, there's another level to that, to where if you get, the goal is over time, hundreds of people who are really, really good at building software with AI, you can have a team of a couple of people build something that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's, when when people look at Gauntlet and what we're offering from the outside, it feels too good to be true. Like we're saying, look, you don't have to pay anything for this training. We're going to fly everybody to Austin. We're going to cover all of the costs for everybody. And anybody who graduates gets an automatic $200,000 a year job at one of these companies. Like that's something I would have killed to have been able to offer over my time, building schools. It just wasn't, you couldn't offer that because didn't make sense on the other side. Who's going
Right.
to,
The ROI wasn't there.
guarantee that? But now it does make sense because if you realize, oh, one of these engineers can build something, in a couple of years by themselves worth $100 million. Now we're talking, right? Now the game is, how do you get as much of that as humanly possible? How do you invest in that as deeply as you can? And that's where we are right now. We're not in the, I think software was getting to the phase where knowing how to build software was not a mystery. It was about optimization, about, how do I get the biggest bang for my buck? How do I get the most software written for the lowest cost? This is a new Cambrian explosion of value creation where if you have an engineer, and I'm sure there are going to be engineers I've been talking to some of the applicants, and it's hard because some of them are like, yeah, I started learning some of the stuff on the side, and now I have, an app that I built that generates $40,000 a month. So I'm not really interested in a $200,000 a year job at that point. Totally, but you should come learn anyway, and we'll still honor that. Then there, yeah. So basically, we think that AI is the biggest force multiplier for human talent that there has ever been. So greater than the steam engine, greater than the factory, greater than anything else. And if we're not entirely wrong about that, the right play is investing as deeply and as heavily and as quickly in that as you possibly can. So,
So, why do you think then that you're able to do this in 12 weeks? It seems like such a short period of time to be able to take people. And maybe this just gets into also like where people are when you're bringing them in, to bring them to the level where they're able to create, within a couple of years, $100 million product.
yeah, so I think there are a couple layers to that. The first is, yeah, we are starting at a different um, level than I'm used to starting at. We're not taking people from zero. We're taking
Mm-hmm.
people who are already engineers. A part that is more controversial that I'm open with talking about is we are doing intelligence testing, and we are selecting for 97th, 98th, 99th percentile general intelligence, which makes everything a lot easier. Then on top of that, I think if you look at why Trilogy University existed and did so well, I think one of the things that it showed people is how much more can be done and how much faster you can learn than what people initially expect. So, one aspect of that is when we say the program is going to be 80 to 100 hours a week, we actually mean that. It is going to be a 12-week absolute grind. This is going to be the only thing you focus on. You're going to eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. I'm sure people will sleep at their desks from time to time. People will pull all-nighters from time to time. That's not, some people don't like that. Some people aren't in the stage of life where that makes sense, but that's kind of what it takes to get to where we want to get to in 12 weeks. And, on an hour for hour basis, that's kind of the same as if you did like a, year and a half, 2 year long master's program. We're just packing it into a really, really tight time horizon. Um, and we also think that I think fundamentally one of our core beliefs are that people can just do so much more, so much faster than 99% of the world expects to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, my hope is that, and people that attended Trilogy University will talk about, how it reshaped the way they viewed everything forever in terms of uh, what's possible, in terms of how quickly things can happen, in terms of, in the Trilogy University days in the '90s, there were some students that would build something and they sold it at the end for tens of millions of dollars that they built
Oh, jeez.
during, the I think it was 10 weeks back then, and that was the explicit goal of Trilogy University. We're not trying to build apps to sell, but I do think there are going to be times where shortly after Gauntlet, somebody builds something that is, pays for all of Gauntlet very, very quickly. So it's just a different world that we live in.
And part of it, I want to kind of circle back to one of the comments that you made, where when they were coming, the companies were coming to you, that Trilogy University isn't working or wouldn't work today because there was the signal isn't there in a lot of the
Yeah.
ways. And so, what's happening? Would you think in the talent market that why something like Gauntlet had to come in and approach it differently, that we couldn't go and use the same kind of talent markers that we were previously using?
Yeah. If you were to go back to when Trilogy University first happened, all that they had to, and it was pretty obvious, you're just fighting over the top students at the top universities, or any student from a top university. So if you had a student that was graduating from Stanford or MIT, blind job offer, whatever you need, that's where the value is going to be created, because that they're incredibly hardworking, that they're very smart, that they have learned the right things. And
The credentialing
basically,
system worked.
yeah, basically none of those three things are true anymore. And I don't want to put words in other people's mouths, but they've been disappointed by the level of talent and commitment and what people are taught in some of the CS programs, and to the extent that they're, I mean, I wouldn't say that the credentials have lost all value, right? I think you'd be crazy to say that a Stanford diploma is worth nothing, but it's not enough that you can just go blindly hire the
Right.
top people from the top anybody who graduates from Stanford gets an automatic job offer is not a wise way to do things anymore.
No, I mean, I
And
remember
yeah,
when I took game theory in college, like the whole point of college in the end is it was a signaling game. Is like I have this piece of paper, and in that is implicit knowledge of you are X, Y, and Z. And today we've inputted a certain level of uncertainty into those variables. Is like you said, it
yeah,
was I could blindly know it was this level of intelligence, this level of hardworking, this level of knowledge, and now we don't know that blindly.
correct. And that's not to say, again, Um, that's not to say that there aren't people at Stanford who are incredibly smart, incredibly hardworking. It's just to say that the credential itself no longer tells you everything you need to know, such that you can hire blindly. Now you need another filtering mechanism, which is something I think about a lot. So we can gate by intelligence and ability to write code and all that stuff on the front end, and obviously we're training people to know how to use AI and to research and to think and to learn and all of that stuff in a very compressed time frame. And there's also kind of the side benefit of both the self-selection of if you're not willing to put in that time and effort,
Right.
then that tells us something. And I'm sure there are going to be people who enroll and then who, I don't know what the ratio will be, who a couple weeks in say, you know what, this is too much for me. I'm out. And that's okay. I don't, I think one of the things that caused that those credentials to lose so much value is that the universities had to feel like they catered to everybody for every specific need. We're very intentionally saying, no, if you, I mean, in every way, right? If you want to be an AI researcher, this is not the path to become an AI researcher. If you want to go work a very chill job that pays the bills and spend all day on your hobbies, this is not the path. This is the path for people who want a launch pad for doing the best work of their lives, for learning as much as they can, as quickly as they possibly can, for doing as much as we can in a tight time frame. And I think we will see people, to use the Paul Graham analogy of startups are compressing the best work of your life into a few years and being done or going on to do something else, or if you're Elon for some reason, just keep going. But yeah, it's going to be very intensive. So we're also filtering for, are you willing to work really, really hard?
Well, and it's funny because to your point, the college almost had the revert. It had the opening of the aperture of this is the gateway to everything that you want. You must get this, and then you can do what you want and follow your passion. And even though that becomes ambiguous, so that you can go get the underwater basket weaving degree, and that will go get you something, even though nobody knows. And then you end up being a barista at Starbucks, versus something like Gauntlet, which is very specifically is no, I can guarantee a job. You do this, you have a job at the end, but then that means you must very specifically here's what they want, because it is these companies want this at the end, so that it narrows the aperture, but then it's guaranteed a job. So it's an
Yep.
interesting
Yeah,
which do you want?
I mean, we are very intentionally saying, how do we create a program such that in the future anybody who graduates from Gauntlet will automatically qualify from job offers at all sorts of places and uh, be more sought after than a Stanford CS student or an MIT CS student, because means something different and more. And that's the underlying goal that we're thinking about as we build all of this. Obviously, you know, until you have the right students learning the right things, working with the right companies, that's a long term goal. But we do think there's a path to saying, maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's a couple years from now, like, oh, I would any day hire somebody who graduated from Gauntlet over a generic Stanford CS degree holder. I think it probably happens after the first cohort, but yeah.
Well, so there's two different directions I kind of want to take. The first one is, so Gauntlet is, you talk about, this isn't like straight out of school. This is probably engineers, and I'm noticing now, especially with the speed of technological change and speed at which a lot of the things are happening, that the idea of, you go to school, you go to college, and then that's it. You're done with education. Is just falling by the wayside. Like, things are changing too fast, and that you need continuing education, whatever way we want to frame that, and how you get that is up in the air. Whether it be, I'm going to go take an off class, or I do something like Gauntlet. How do you see that actually changing? Do you think that someone who takes Gauntlet in 6 years, there's going to be, Gauntlet Quantum? I'm making it up, right? What, like, some sort of next technological change that they would go back and do these kinds of things again?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I think it's difficult to be in the business of predicting the next sweeping technological change.
Right.
I mean, I still remember 2016. I was working at a company that brought Sam Altman, who's now obviously the founder of OpenAI, to speak, and they're like, what are you interested in? What are you thinking about? And he said, all I care about is AI and nuclear fission. And those were like the transformer paper, I don't think, that kind of created all this generative
It was
AI stuff.
17, wasn't it?
Yeah, so this was before that, so they were
Yeah.
kind of interested in it and waiting for it. I couldn't have predicted in my wildest dreams that AI would look like it does today. Back then, AI was really good machine learning and deep learning, and
Yeah.
fundamentally different algorithms and practices. But what I do think, as far as education goes, is that current the existing education system, call it the Puritan education system, one room schoolhouse that developed into the sprawling education system we have now. I'm sure 5 years from now, most people will still go through exactly this. I would guess that it's so big that not everybody's going to be an early adopter of other systems. But I look at, even my son, who is 6, we started using adaptive AI apps kind of after school, saying, what can we do to speed run math? How quickly can, if you spend 45 minutes a day on this stuff, how fast can you learn? And uh, it's just so dramatically faster. And yeah. So I think education in general is built to cater to the median or maybe the bottom 25%. I mean, my wife was a public school teacher,
Hmm.
and writing a lesson plan was easy. Figuring out what to do with the top 3 students who are going to burn through it and be bored, and the bottom 5 students who are not going to get it. That's, they call it accommodations in teaching. That's where you spend 90% of your time. I think AI makes everything instantly adaptive in a way that you don't have to create a single lesson plan for everybody. Everybody will move at their own pace, and net, I think that's actually faster for everybody, including the bottom students. But we're still in the very early phases of seeing that roll out, and Austin is actually one of the forefronts of that happening.
Yeah, I think it becomes a big question about what is it that you need to learn, because it's not the memorization, it's not the dates, it's not the, I mean, like, so, I have the kids about the same age, And it's always funny when they just like, well, so what do you, what's this, what's that, right? And they're like, because they know they have all the answers in the pocket, right? And so it's not this day. And so it was really funny. It was the other day I was going through the drive-through, and my 5-year-old is asking me. He's like, well, how do they make bricks? I was like, fine. I was like, I go to ChatGPT and I say, go voice mode. I'm like, here, just ask. He's like, oh, so he's like, how do you make bricks? Answers him. It's like, how do you make clay? Answers him. How do you make Legos? And he goes, how do you build a rocket? And you can just see like all this kind of things that going, and the availability, and as you said, the adaptability of these kinds of things. And then it becomes a different skill set. It becomes about the curiosity. It becomes about you know how you shape problems, less so about maybe as you say, come back to your whole point. When with these AI engineers, it wasn't that they're coding, it's about the how they shape the coding, for lack of a better term.
Well, and not to go too deep into the weeds of the philosophy of Gauntlet, but the great and the terrible thing about AI is it will give you the absolute consensus view every single time. So one of the important things to learn is how do you quickly identify, how do you quickly learn enough to build your own mental model of what is right, what is wrong, and importantly, what is, I know this is almost a cliche phrase in Silicon Valley, but what do you know that is contrarian but right?
Mm-hmm.
What are those? Wes Cow has a really good. She's a founder of a company called, shoot, I'm forgetting what it's called, but you can Google it. She has a blog post called "Spiky Points of View," and so what are the ways in which the truth diverges from base assumption of. I think that was written at a time pre AI of just the people around you,
Yeah.
but now importantly, um, when does your spiky point of view diverge from the consensus view that a model holds? And because one of the most important aspects of building a great product is having spiky points of view. And so that's actually a core part of the curriculum is, we're building, we call them second brains or brain lifts. How do you rapidly go into a topic, get the best expertise that you can, not only learn everything that you can, but create a digital representation of that learning, and then feed it to an AI model in such a way that it actually changes what the AI model thinks and how it behaves. Because AI models are incredibly stubborn. They always want to revert back to the consensus. So you're kind of fighting them. But yeah, I mean, actually, if you're to go back and look at like the fundamental doc that we put together with the companies when we said, what does it take to create a $100 million app with a couple of people? And it was being able to build first with AI and being able to build and find spiky points of view very rapidly.
Right.
So yeah.
Because one of the I've had questions about this with others is like, how do we get towards the one button company or like these real fast? Because to your point, if you don't have these spiky points of view and you just say build me X, then it becomes the AI slop. It becomes all the same. That's why, like,
Yeah.
as you deal with, I write a lot, and I do use AI as a tool to help me write. And so, but then I can tell when people just say, give me a paragraph or a post or whatever on X, and then they just copy and paste it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they
Yeah.
haven't adjusted it. They haven't used it as a tool. They just said, do the work for me. And you see like delve, or you see all, overuse of dashes or those kinds of things, because they're like, it's all just the one thing. And then you can see it. And then obviously people who do coding, the same thing. You're like, it'll all just be that same. You have to, I like that it's spiky points of view, bringing it in and then bending it to your will and not you bending to the will of the AI.
Yeah. It's, I don't know, it's fascinating. I mean, when you zoom out and look at, I mean, the amount of time I spent thinking about so I'll break down like there are going to be technical inaccuracies of this, but like if you look at how AI works, right? It's basically it's doing next token generation, so it's swallowed all of the writing on the internet and it's looking at like, okay, statistically, if I see these three words, what are the next couple words likely to be? And that's all that AI is doing that at scale really, really rapidly. And it's frankly mind blowing that you can take that and turn it into, okay, generate a 3D image of a golden retriever jumping into a rainbow, and it works. Like it's bonkers. And but yeah, the same way, in old machine learning days, everyone would say, you're going what garbage in, garbage out. Obviously not garbage in. You could have something that's trained on Shakespeare and it's going to spit out Shakespeare, or its best approximation of what Shakespeare thinks. So if you swallow everything that's on the internet and every book that's ever been written and every movie that's ever been, you swallow everything, you're going to spit out the kind of median expectation of all of humanity based on what you've trained it on, right? Um, which is super, super powerful, but
It's also the
definitely not
median, as you just said.
right.
You've got Shakespeare and
Um,
you've got crap.
yep. Um, and that said, I mean, that's before we get into hallucination and
Right.
other issues, but yeah, developing points of view that are divergent and right is actually a core facet of being able to do things with AI really well.
Do do you see Gauntlet being a new type of like not only talent development but like talent attraction? One of the things I thought was funny is you like we're doing this in Austin, we're putting this in, and then I think what it was like 3 or 4 days later, I saw you post like, okay, some UK EU companies have come to us, and now we're starting to do this. So because if you're in, if you think AI, obviously you think the Bay, right? Like, and so they're able to go and probably fight and steal and attract from each other, and it has that natural gravity. Is something like Gauntlet a way to be able to build outside of these more kind of, I don't want to say natural hubs, these hubs that have that kind of narrative around it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are a lot of different cities that are fighting for supremacy or for being the next Silicon Valley or whatever.
I hate that phrase.
I don't think Austin has ever really tried to be the next Silicon Valley. It's very content to do its own thing. um, but yeah, there's definitely, if you look at the people who, to go back to the Trilogy University example, if Trilogy University didn't exist in the 90s and bring all sorts of people to Austin, there's so many people and so many companies that wouldn't be in Austin today as a result of that. Um, I don't, so I think there are, I mean, I'm already getting pinged here and there from, can we run something similar in X location? What would it take? So we'll have to see how that develops. But I think the Silicon Valley was incredibly lucky in that it became the place that smart people went to be around other smart, ambitious people.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a monopoly on that, a whole lot of stuff just works out, and the government can, as we've seen, run about as inefficiently and poorly as possible. And also having dry coastline doesn't, and good weather doesn't hurt. But yeah, I think definitely if your goal is building an ecosystem, something like Gauntlet is kind of a really good jumping off point. You're going to import a whole lot of really bright, really talented people to one specific region. And I think that, you know, Austin sees the impacts of Trilogy University every day today. And there are probably thousands of people who are employed by X TU grads who came to Austin for TU, and I hope that we'll see similar impact. Yeah.
One of the things that I think has been really interesting, we obviously mentioned Trilogy University a lot of times, and what's fascinating is that Austin is growing as this kind of ed tech education experiment hub. I mean, Joe Lamont, the founder of Trilogy, went on to found Alpha School. The University of Austin is here. Actually, a recent episode of the podcast, I had the chief revenue officer of Udemy on because they were expanding in Austin, and it's kind of come under the radar, and then all of a sudden it's a lot is being built here, and I'm sure there's a lot going on that I don't even know about. And given your sense, obviously being in this space, do you have a sense of why you think Austin is becoming such a hub for that?
Yeah, I think there are three main reasons. The first is the interest of the people who were in Austin just turned to education. So the Joe Lamonts of the world definitely move the needle there, right? The second is there is a level of freedom, and I say freedom both from a regulatory standpoint, but more importantly from a cultural standpoint, to where if you were to go to, let's say, somebody who lived in Boston and say, hey, you should take your kid out of the top prep school in Boston and enroll them in this experimental, non-traditional tech-based school that we think is better, culturally, that's just not going to fly
Right.
ever. Um, Austin kind of has that frontier spirit where little quirkiness is okay. And I combine that with um, just enough regulatory freedom to try stuff like that. I think that's dramatically underestimated. That um, there are, when we're operating a school, there are states where we have to send in thousands of pages to make any curriculum change, and then it's going to come back redlined by regulators who don't understand any of it. They're just going to look for grammar errors, and it's going to be a 6-month delay before you can change anything, and that's just a non-starter for schools, for good schools. I think even if Stanford were required to operate under similar guidelines, and they're not changing their curriculum as frequently as an AI school at all,
Yeah.
but it would still be very frustrating. So I think, Austin has the right mix of the right people. There's definitely enough capital, and then a culture of freedom of experimentation that and freedom in general that allows it to really thrive. And now I think you're starting to see the compounding network effects of, now there are a lot of education savvy people in Austin. If I've toured, one of my hobbies was like going to every alternative school and, looking at everything that's every charter school, all the stuff that, you could look at. Not one of them is more impressive than Alpha in Austin. And I mean, Alpha's honestly, I think, head and shoulders above anything else that I've seen. So I think that's going to help. That's going to keep compounding. I'm moving to Austin, right? Otherwise, I have no qualms against Austin, but my family's in Utah. We would have been in Utah, or if tech pulled us to the Bay Area, we'd be in the Bay Area. But I and parts of our team are going to be moving to Austin as well. So,
And we're really happy to have you coming to Austin. So that's going to be great.
thank you. Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good.
So I think that's the perfect place to always end with the same question. So then, Austin, what's next for the city of Austin?
I think Austin has done exactly what it should have. It didn't try, and not to be critical of other places, but so I live in Utah, right? And Utah has been one of the sales capitals of the world, because most people here serve a mission. You learn to be a really good salesperson on a mission, and sales hubs are built in Utah that are just incredible. Utah is really, really good at sales. But when Utah had a tech scene that was coming on, instead of saying, hey, we are the go-to-market sales hub of the economy, they tried to say we're the Silicon Slopes. We're the next Silicon Valley. And it's just not. I say that, I've spent, I was in the Bay Area for 5 years. I've been in Utah for 3 or 4 years. I was born here. It's just, you're not going to win by trying to be the third best of X,
100%.
Austen, and not even intentionally, kind of Austen just found a home for all of the people who think a little bit differently and see the world a little bit differently. And a lot of those happen to be founders. And I do think there was some, like, if you live in San Francisco, it's a little bit exhausting. And so, some flight as a result of that. But Austin's not trying to become the next Silicon Valley. Austen is trying to be Austen. And I really, really appreciate that. I think if Austen, the fail case for Austen would be it tries to implement all the same policies and practices and procedures and goals that almost work in San Francisco and try to bring that all to Austen. I think that would be a dramatic failure. The success case would be Austen continues to be the place where, and you look at Elon and Tesla as kind of and SpaceX as a symbol of that, right? They're kind of rejected in California in some ways. And historically, if there's a place where all of the independent thinking vagabonds go with a lot of ambition, that's going to be a really cool place. And that's a place you want to be. So I think if that's what Austen becomes, it's going to be a huge win for Austen.
No, that's fantastic. I agree with everything that you said. Before we head out, you want to tell everybody again where to find Gauntlet and the deadlines to apply?
Yeah, gauntletai.com. And the deadline to apply is January 4th.
No, I think it's a fantastic program, and it's going to be great. And I'm so glad that you are building it here. Austen, thanks you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you.
So what's next, Austen? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.